being so concerned about offending people has made all of the studios afraid to make content that doesn't look like something from the past.
Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 9 recorded November 2023. This is Trek Profiles, where every episode we talk with a Star Trek fan, we discuss their history with the show, and we try to figure out why Star Trek matters to us. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 90. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com, that's email, or on Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky at Trek Profiles. Spoiler warning, on this show, any episode of Star Trek may be discussed at any time. You have been warned, humans. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the kindly and collaborative, kinda capricious, but never chaotic M5 Multitronic unit. Greet the humans, M5.
The M5 was at full power.
All right, show me the messages, M5.
Announcements ready.
Trek Profiles is an independent show. If you'd like to support us, the best way to do that is just to follow us wherever you're getting your audio. We are on all the major platforms, and your following us helps other Trek fans find us. This podcast is 100% advertising free. We don't have a supporters program or anything like that, but if you'd like to show some appreciation, I'd ask for you to consider making a donation to our official charity here on the show, and that's the Children's Fund for Glycogen Storage Disease. There's a link at trekprofiles.com/donate to give directly to the charity if you'd like to participate. All right, something interesting happened here with this episode. 2 or 3 weeks, I guess, after the initial recording, my guest, Sharon, got back in touch with me. She wanted to come back on for a few minutes, and it turns out that after we had recorded the primary show, she had watched some more Star Trek, and she thought back on some of her comments, and she wanted to revise some of her earlier thoughts and opinions. So what I've done here is the primary interview that you're going to hear is pretty much as we recorded it. We do the Kobayashi Maru lightning round and all that, and then we close out the interview. And then after the little closing jingle where we normally start the bonus material, I'm going to come back on and introduce the second part of the interview. So watch for that. And after that second interview, we're going to have the bonus material. And in that bonus material, we are going to talk a lot about the Apple TV Plus show Severance. If you have not seen that show, you should skip that content after the second interview. It's going to contain massive spoilers for the show. And the show is really delightful if you go into it unspoiled, so you have been warned. Enjoy it or not, as you choose. Let's talk about the Kobayashi Maru lightning round. At the end of every interview, my guest gets 5 terrible multiple-choice Star Trek questions, and they have to give us their answer. And of course, after each episode, when it drops, I tweet those questions out as polls where you can have your say. So let's take a look at the questions from episode 88 with Mary Foltz and see how it went. Question 1. We're hanging out in the virtual bar on the Titan. Who are we drinking with? Raffi, Seven, Shaw, or Jack? Now, some people decided to go do their own write-in candidates here and mix and match, but those are ignored in my Kobayashi Maru lightning round. The glory of this game is that you have to pick from the choices you are given. So Mary picked Shaw, but the audience picked Seven with 36%. Shaw got 35, close second. Crusher got 15, and Raffi got 14. Question 2. Which of these Kazon sects is the worst? The Kazon Ogla, the Kazon R'Lora, or the Kazon Pomar? My guest and the listeners were in complete agreement on this one, and it was the Ogla. They were the worst, getting 95% in the poll. The Pomar got 5, and the R'Lora got nothing. Question 3. Pick a battle to watch. Clock de Kel Brocht, Donatu 5, or Caleb 4. Now, Mary picked Caleb 4, but that's only because she had a brother by that name, she said. But the audience wanted to see Donatu 5 with 38%. Caleb 4 came in second at 33%, and Clock de Kel Brocht was in last place with 29%. Question 4. What are we wearing to the Federation Ball? Strange New Worlds duty uniforms, Season 1 Discovery Type A, or the Prodigy Type B? My guest said the Prodigy Type B, but the Strange New Worlds duty uniform was the choice online with 52%. Prodigy got 37%, and the Discovery Type A's got only 11%. Question 5. Which of these planets would you like to see? The Borg homeworld, the Breen homeworld, or Boranus 3? Mary wanted to see that Borg homeworld, but in a surprising turn of events, the Borg and the Breen tied at 43% apiece, with Boranus 3 getting only 14%. Now, if you enjoyed those questions and would like to take a stab at writing your own for possible inclusion in the show, send them to me at feedback@trekprofiles.com or DM me on Twitter. And in fact, some portions of the Kobayashi Maru questions in this very episode that were asked to my guest were written by a listener and actually a former guest on the show, Peter Wolchak. I thank Peter for his suggestions. That's it for announcements, news, and weather. Let's get to it. M5, start the show.
Interview transmission commencing.
Her favorite character is the one and only JLP from TNG. She also loves Moriarty and the Borg, and for some reason, Species 8472. She is from New York City, North America, Earth, in Sector 001. It's Sharon Simon. Welcome, Sharon. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I love my intro.
The M5 is giving me the bombastic side eye because I have not asked question 1, which is, Sharon, are you a Star Trek fan?
Yes, I am very much a Star Trek fan.
And when did you decide Star Trek was for you?
I didn't decide Star Trek was for me. It just became for me. I don't remember the first time I saw the original series. I believe I saw that because I'm older than you would think I am. And let's just keep it that way.
Okay.
But I believe I saw that as the first series. It never clicked for me.
Okay.
And the Next Generation would be on. I would be getting home from work because I've always worked at night, and it would be on. And I have a vague memory of watching it with my mom and feeling like I had finally seen something that connected with me on a level that nothing ever had. And I'm not positive, but I believe it was the episode where Data is learning to dream.
Okay.
And starting to understand himself through his dreams. And I thought it was just about the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I am the daughter of a science fiction fan. My mother was a big fan of Dune and tried to get me into Dune. Dune does not. I've tried so many times. I can't do Dune. I laugh when I think about it because I think about Sting running in the boner suit, and that's like my biggest thought from Dune. It's just not. I tried the books, everything, but there was this movie ages ago called The Philadelphia Experiment.
Yes.
And the whole idea of time travel and meeting your grandfather, I was so little. This is pre-Star Trek. Like, for me, pre-Star Trek. The whole idea of this being possible really messed with my head. So I got further into it. With getting into Star Trek, my mom tried to explain warp drive to me by doing that little thing that you do for kids with a piece of paper and putting a line through it and a hole through it.
Oh, right. That's jump drives though. That's not the warp drive thing. I don't know. I will have to get your mom on and sort her out.
My mom tried to explain to little Sharon what this meant. That a lot of things I've always been a little bit different, and now it's wonderful. Being different's now really, really celebrated.
Yes, it is.
But it wasn't back in the day. And Star Trek was a place where I saw people that were more like me, that I connected with more, that were interested in things that interested me, like the meaning of life and bettering ourselves and understanding our enemies, as opposed to, oh God, I hate romance. Like, so I mean, and I know there's romance in Star Trek. Sometimes I'm okay with it. Sometimes I'm like, oh, come on, man, why? But that stuff never spoke to me. So,
are you a Beverly Crusher Picard shipper?
No.
Okay,
no,
it's an audio podcast. They can't see you. You have to say the words.
I like it, but because in Picard, them having been married and having a son, I thought was sweet. But particularly the episode where they connect through, and I'm sorry, I don't remember names very well, but the episode where they connect in their minds, that they start.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with them having breakfast together, I find it so formulaic and annoying.
Oh dear. Oh dear. There are
I'm
people out there
sorry.
gnashing their teeth. But before we move on, I just want to say, if you haven't
I
seen,
love the Lana and Tom Paris together. Like, that's one romance I love them together.
if you haven't seen the recent Dune movie, I would encourage you to check that out.
Okay.
It's a different experience.
So I rewatched the old Dune about 5 years ago, and after watching it, I posted on Facebook. I'm not saying my husband's abusive, but I did watch Dune last night.
No, the movie is the one that they just came out with is very good.
Okay.
And it's fairly close to the books with some stuff taken out, but they didn't really go. They didn't really make up a lot of stuff that's not in the books. They made some different choices, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So I would encourage you to check that out. And when the new one comes out, which I think will be next year sometime, I think, or thereabouts. I think it'd be a nice series to watch. It's got very modern sensibilities. The effects are fantastic and all that. Okay, so let's get back to it then. So you apparently watched a little bit of TOS first, didn't connect with it, didn't really care about it. Then TNG came on, and you were really interested in that. So was this an original syndication or later reruns?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And in terms of the original series, I feel like I was so little. I feel like it looked to me the same way that the Twilight Zone did, but the Twilight Zone spoke to me a little bit more, but it had that same feel and the same time frame in terms of me looking at it and being like, oh, it's black and white. It's like it's not high quality like I'm used to seeing. It's so obviously the Twilight Zone's significantly older, but I was so little that they got jumped into my head in the same place. But I'm not sure, and I would have to tell you how old I am and how old I was for us to figure that out. But
I wouldn't ask you that. I wouldn't ask you.
So let's just say this. It was on currently when I was watching it. Whether or not I saw it in reruns or the first time it aired, I'm not sure. Does that make sense?
No worries. No worries. So did you stay current with Star Trek as it was coming out? Because we had TNG, and that led us straight into Deep Space Nine, which led us straight into Voyager, which led us straight into Enterprise. I mean, were you watching all this stuff as it came out?
I was one of those people who felt like if Gene Roddenberry didn't create it, it wasn't Star Trek. And I turned my nose up at Deep Space Nine, and I turned my nose up at Voyager. And then I came to understand that my college roommates were also Star Trek fans, and one of them sat me down and gave me this long triad about why these other shows are amazing and I have to watch them. And if I'm not watching Voyager, I'm not supporting women. So not only did I start watching them, went from the beginning and then followed them. There was then this period of time in the Northeast where I think I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was a rerun of The Next Generation, and then Deep Space Nine or Voyager, and then late at night was Earth Final Contact, Final Conflict, I think was called.
Yeah, that was the other show that Gene was involved in. Yeah,
and they went in order late at night, and I was working at this job as a bartender on a boat, and I was completely miserable. And I would get home and I would make myself a margarita, and I would sit and I would just watch for hours. Those, and I'm sure somebody's going to be watching and be like, she's so wrong, the order of it. Look, I was drinking margaritas, so I'm not sure, but I did. Some of that stuff was new content at the time.
Fantastic. So that was sort of the Berman era. Did you ever go back to TOS?
The original series? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So have you seen it all by now? As far as we're just talking about TOS and then all the TNG, Deep Space Nine, have you seen all that at this point?
I've seen most of it. I would say, let's put it that way. And even then, maybe because I smoke too much pot or something, every once in a while I'll be watching The Next Generation and be like, I don't remember this episode. Be like, I have seen every episode from The Next Generation like 3 times. So that's like a memory thing. That's a me thing. But probably
that happens. That happens all the time. I mean, I've talked to, hardcore Star Trek fans who swear they've seen everything 1,000 times, and then I'll see them on social media, something, be like, I have no recollection of this episode whatsoever. And sometimes it's intentional. We sort of push it out of our memory. I don't know if you want to say anything about this. I mean, you certainly can if you want to. I think part of the problem is in the streaming era when everything's always on demand. People tend to go back to the same episodes, the ones they really like. And those of us who are of an age when we had to watch the episodes that were selected for us we sort of have a different experience in consuming the show. So I think that's part of it.
So there's two things to that. They did a study and found that when you watch television that you're very, very familiar with, it gives off oxytocin in the brain in the same way it does when you see an old friend. So it's kind of like therapeutic if you've had a long day and you want to watch that episode that you love and tune it out. It gives you feel-good hormones. My husband found something where we have a Star Trek channel now that I don't Peacock. I don't know where it is.
Pluto TV.
Yeah, so we have that Star Trek channel. So I put that on often, and it's only the original series and the Next Generation. I haven't seen anything else on it. But we don't choose what it plays. It plays what it plays.
Ah, right. Okay. All right.
To that.
So then in the 2000s, we had the Kelvin movies that came out, Chris Pine and all of that. Did you watch those?
Yes, I did. And I was so I don't love the sequels, but I love the first one. Love the first one. And my one and only big Star Trek crush is from that movie. I had a huge crush on the Doctor, so much that I was at the time wanting to be single, and I made him my screen so it'd be like, oh, you don't need to date, just fantasize about this guy.
It's your TV boyfriend.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So that first movie really spoke to me. I think it's one of the best Star Trek movies, and I watched the sequels. I went to the movies to see the sequels. I don't know. I think it's okay to say they weren't bad. I enjoyed them, but I just don't think the level of content, acting, story, everything was at the same level as the first one.
Oh, that's
fair. And the
fair.
Doctor wasn't in it as much.
So I think that one of the things that the first movie has, the 2009 film, that especially has, is the fact that it was the first time Star Trek was coming back. So it's sort of, whatever the movie was, whatever the content was, right? Just the fact that you're going to a movie theater to see Star Trek again, right? And there had been nothing since Enterprise, and we had sort of this fallow period in the mid 2000s until we got the 2009 film. I mean, that's super exciting when you get a chance to see it. So. Okay. And then we had the modern streaming era, CBS All Access, Paramount Plus, starting with Discovery and all of that. Have you consumed any of that at all?
Most of it. Discovery is so complicated. So many people are like, oh, I don't like it because it breaks canon and stuff. Like, Star Trek is always playing with things like that. So I don't love that they do that, but I don't have a problem with that they do that. I need to watch it a third time because I still don't get everything. Again, maybe too many margaritas when I'm watching, but now I'm older, so now it's switched to a glass of red wine. But I enjoy the special effects on Discovery are phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
the acting's wonderful. It's just the story's really complicated, and I love the Klingons. I know that's very
controversial. Yeah, it's controversial. Yeah. You like the new Klingons?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, fantastic.
I mean, nothing. Worf is one of my favorite characters. We spoke briefly about my dislike of romance in general. I actually like Troy with Worf. I wish that.
Oh my God. You're killing me with this.
I love Jonathan Frakes. I love Riker, but I would have liked to seen him a lifelong player.
I can't get my brain wrapped around Troy and Worf together. I just find it so bizarre. I don't know.
I think they're perfect for each other.
And no, Kalar was perfect for him. That was the one true ship. That was the one true ship. By the way, I'm a little disappointed we never found out what happened to Alexander in Star Trek Picard.
I mean, the actor passed on. Maybe they didn't want to touch on him because he was so young.
What, they already had like 4 people playing that role at various points. They already had 4 people. That number's off the top of my head. It might not be right. No emails, please. Okay. So as we sit here, I realize I didn't ask you to come up with this ahead of time, but just give me a percentage. What percentage of all Star Trek do you think you've seen as we sit here? Somewhere 80%?
Probably 90. Okay. I haven't seen Prodigy.
Oh, Prodigy's fantastic.
Yeah, I've only seen a little bit of Prodigy. That's. Oh, and I can't sit. So let's say 80, because we'll talk about Enterprise when you want to, but.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, I like Star Trek Enterprise, but then again, I like most of it. So, well, we will talk about that. So when Star Trek
Prodigy, I want to watch. I just haven't yet.
So when you're watching Star Trek, you mentioned that you have a husband. Do you watch it together, or is it a solo activity for you?
So it's both. It's both. So we watch it together. Here, I don't even know if I want you to put this is about something else. I cannot get him to watch Strange New Worlds. He gave up on it because of that thing that we had spoken about earlier. But I'm watching that alone. But like Picard, I couldn't even watch the next episode until we were home together to watch it. He is very much of the mind that if Gene Roddenberry wasn't involved, it's not Star Trek. But he does like the new movies. He loved Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I could sooner get him to watch Discovery with me again. When we watched Picard together, we cried together the way couples who go to church do. The person who officiated our wedding wore a Star Trek pin that he poked a hole in his suit for us so that he would wear it for us.
Nice.
Which we have in our cupboard, and it's definitely a part of what brought us together. But
if your husband's all right with it, send me your wedding photo with the guy with the Star Trek pin. I'll put that up on the show.
I'll look for it. I don't have good wedding photos. I hired a very bad wedding photographer, and no worries. I sadly have. I probably something with him, but I couldn't get him to watch Voyager with me, and I tried because he didn't like it. And as much as I've described Deep Space Nine to him because he likes things that are serial, and it's the first time Star Trek was really serial, he still calls it Space Mall and won't like
Star Trek Space Mall.
Yeah. He's like if he sees me watching, he's like, "You watching Space Mall?" And that's actually it's fine. That's actually the show I want to rewatch from the beginning is Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine, I think, is such an amazing piece of work, and I thought when we got close that he would do that with me, but
no. Do you watch it on a big screen or a small screen, like on a phone or something?
I think for New Yorkers we have a big screen, but for anywhere else in the country we have a small screen.
Fair enough.
We have a nice big TV, but most of my friends who don't live in New York, their TVs are significantly bigger.
Right on. So have you ever collected anything?
So I want to say this because I don't know if it'll come back up. There was an event at the Pally Center in New York City to celebrate Strange New Worlds, and they were playing Star Trek: The Next Generation on a movie theater screen during it, and that was so exciting to see it in a huge screen. I think I have a picture I can send of you somewhere of me like pointing up with
yeah, send me that. Oh, I love that stuff. I mean, I took my kid to see Star Trek 2 in the movie theater because they did, they're doing these occasional re-releases of some classic films, and they're like a special event through, I think it's Fathom is the company that puts the stuff on. And the one that got me the most, and this is just my own particular nerddom, is they did a screening of Motion Picture. And I love the motion picture.
I do too.
There's just nothing like seeing it, in the theater on the screen, because it really is made for that. Yeah. And, just that whole 6 minutes of looking at the Enterprise is like, it's a high point for me. Some people hate it. I'm like, you do you, pal. I love it. All right, glorious. So have you ever collected anything?
So I don't like to collect things. I have a problem with clutter. I've known people hoard in my life, so I don't like to have a lot of stuff, and I'm working hard to get rid of stuff. So sadly, somewhere along the line, all my Star Trek figures are gone. I probably made that decision at a time where I needed the space, but I don't have I used to have tons of them. I used to have them all over my bookshelves. So I have you didn't ask this, but I have a pet parrot who I've had for a very long time. And I thought it would be fun to make her a Star Trek villain, to like sort of set the figures up and then put her in and they're scared because there she is and she's bigger than them. And she was so afraid of the action figures.
Oh my goodness. Were these the Playmates?
About 2 inches big, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay. The little ones. Okay.
Yeah, the little ones. So I don't know why she loves dogs. I can put her next to a bull mastiff and she'll be like, "Hi, yoo-hoo," and like sort of flirt with them, but these action figures scared the shit out of her, so I couldn't do it. But I that's the only time I was a collector. My most special things I have from Star Trek are from Las Vegas.
Okay.
From the Star Trek experience, I have a Starfleet Academy t-shirt that I love very much. I have a picture of myself with the Borg as Borg that you could get. Back then, anybody can do this now with AI, but back then you couldn't.
Right.
I had a beautiful mug from the Star Trek experience that I don't have anymore, that broke somewhere along the line. And I have a denim jacket that you'll see I'm wearing in my headshot that has a Star Trek patch on it, a Starfleet Academy patch on it.
Nice.
That I absolutely adore and is very special to me. But I'm not a collector in general. As a person with a parrot, people think I want things with parrots on them. And I always love a gift, and it's always very sweet, but it's not. I like to have all different types of things. That makes sense. I should have just said no. I don't. Sorry.
Well, I live in Vegas. I think I mentioned that to you. And one of my friends used to work in retail over there at the experience. And I know some of the actors who used to work on that. And I've been involved in some of their events. They do things occasionally, get-togethers. And there's a nerd bar here in town, and they throw events for different anniversaries of the experience. Those are always fun. And you get to see sort of some of the stuff that people made and some of the behind the scenes stuff. It's just it's glorious. So yeah, send me a photo of that stuff. I'd love to put that up on the website. So
I don't have any more like many of the things, but one of my favorite things was I had a Borg teddy bear that, looking at it, made me laugh.
Yeah,
because it's like they accidentally assimilated a teddy bear, just the whole idea of it.
Oh, that's glorious. I love it. So I assume you've never worn a cosplay then?
No, I want to. While I was in the experience, I was in a really bad relationship in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go to the experience he and I would go on vacation, and then I would leave and go to the experience by myself and hang out there.
Okay.
And at one point I did again, they don't have to do these things now because everyone can do this themselves, but I put on a dress and did one of those movies where you reenact. So that's like the closest I've ever gotten. If I was going to cosplay, part of the problem is I would want to dress as Guinan, which as somebody as pale white as I am would be offensive. But that's the character that I relate to as me being more like.
Okay.
And I think that's part of cosplay is.
It can be. So tell me why Guinan is someone you identify with.
She's a bartender. She doesn't have the technical experience of the other people on the ship.
Okay.
I have no interest in school. I have no interest in following orders. Neither does she. She's wise and loves to listen and loves to learn about others. And she is more than she seems to be. And she has very, very deep connections with others and a deep curiosity.
Have you ever been to a sci-fi or Star Trek convention?
I have not. That's want to. The whole idea of being in that level of crowd is hard for me to picture. Obviously the Star Trek experience, like the Palais Center, have an influx of people constantly. So there's not like a huge amount of people all at once. I hope to work at one. That's I have friends who've done comedy at them.
Yeah.
I have not. I had an opportunity to do one in Maryland when I was working that weekend already, so I regretted that I couldn't. I would love to work at one.
Let's talk about that for a second. So do you do like nerd comedy?
I have jokes about everything that's important to me. So I have jokes about Star Trek. I have jokes about Star Trek that I don't tell now, but because they're time related, but I had jokes about Star Trek that I was able to tell anywhere. And I have jokes about Star Trek that I could only tell for Star Trek fans. So yeah, and my first, I have a little trouble with. I love the artist stand up and how it is. Stand up is like jazz or like bluegrass in that what
Hmm.
you see at any show is only going on in that particular show.
Right.
So now there's this big heavy aspect of you have to film everything and then you have to put things up on YouTube and on Instagram, and I'm doing this because you have to, but I think it's taking away from the art form because when you see it live, it looks really different. It feels really different. My first successful clip was of me talking about growing up as a girl nerd and not being able to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, if you send me a link to that, I'll put that up on the show notes
Okay,
page.
yeah, I will.
I think that's great. But, I think you bring up something that I think is important. I've talked about on the show repeatedly that one of my favorite parts of the old Star Trek conventions, they don't really do anymore, is they used to have these screening rooms where they would just be showing Star Trek like 24/7 in a room during the convention, and you never knew what episode was coming up. There wasn't like a schedule. You would just sit there and there would just be episodes playing. And this, of course, was in the days before everything was on demand and streaming.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually a valuable service that you wanted at that time that you didn't really, today it makes less sense to actually devote the time to do that. But I would say there was just something magical about sitting in a room with a bunch of other nerds who love the stuff just as much as you and watching it together and just having that experience. I mean, it's just glorious. And I think that that's probably something analogous to what you're talking about, that when you go to a comedy show and you're sitting there in the audience with all the other people, there's a human moment that's happening. And if your primary purpose as the performer is to get something that you can put up on YouTube or in TikTok, you're not in the moment with those people. You're thinking about something else.
Yeah.
Right. So I get it. I absolutely get it. So one thing I will not do, and I've learned, I'm not going to ask you to tell me any jokes because I know how difficult that is for a comedian to do at a venue like this. So I'm not going to do that. But
it's so hard on these things. But I have this. So I've been very interested, and you didn't ask me, and I'm not going to tell the joke, but it's just a concept to tell you the concept of this, that I would have the opportunity to tell this bit. I've been very interested because of some things that happened to me in my past. I've been very interested in how cults work and how somebody goes from being a good person to following a cult leader and then doing bad things. And it's hard for me to imagine that unless I think about LeVar Burton being a cult leader. Because if LeVar Burton was a cult, like if he said, because he says read books, and we're like, yeah, of course, LeVar, we're going to read books. But then if he says, wear a banana clip over your eyes, you're like, it's LeVar Burton. I'll do it for LeVar Burton. And he says you have to have sex with only me, and then you're like, well, it's LeVar Burton, of course. Like so I can't even work the bit out because most people don't know what I'm talking about. The old joke that I have, though, that I'll share the joke is not even relevant today because today there are attractive female nerds absolutely everywhere.
Yes, of course.
But 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. And so the joke was I was single at the time, and I was like, I want to meet somebody. I'd want to find the right place to go because, of course, if I go to a Playboy convention, I'm like a 2 or 3. But if I go to a Star Trek convention, I'm a 7 of 9. So that was
oh, very good.
Thank you. That's not relevant at all today, but
very good. No, I get it. That joke would probably go over very differently, I think, with a group. I can tell you though, if you've not been to the conventions, I think it's easy to confuse sort of the Comic-Con experience, which of course there's one in New York, there's the big one in San Diego. Those are very much about waiting in lines and huge crowds. And they're really different, I think, than like the Star Trek Las Vegas experience, the one that's here in August. It's not quite the same experience. It's I don't want to say low key, but I'll say that there's less running around and waiting in lines because nothing is oversold at Star Trek Las Vegas. So there's enough room in the main theater for everybody who bought a ticket. So you're never like, oh, I have to line up at 10 o'clock in the morning for this thing at 1 o'clock and, be in this huge line with 1,000 other people to hope I get a shot. Like you're going to get in. So and there's even reserved seats if you want that sort of thing. So it's a different experience. So if you ever get the urge
I
And you ever?
I have the urge, but I don't have an urge to get on a plane at the moment. That's I've developed like a fear of flying. So getting to Vegas would be
Yeah, that'll make the world very big for you. Yeah.
um, but I'll consider that in terms of when it's back here, because it does, of course, come to New York City.
Right on, right on. So one of the things that came up from the M5, and he says I should ask you about this, is your dad in his final days. So please tell me about this.
My father's very sweet, very well-meaning cat scratched my father. He was on dialysis and had other health problems, and then he fell. And an infection from the cat stuff went into his knee, and he got very, very sick. And so it's just something people should know, that after a certain age, a cat can be potentially dangerous. To be careful. You can put little things on the cat claws, and you can trim their nails. Don't get rid of your cat, but just to be very mindful of that. But I was his caretaker, and it was during COVID, so I was his caretaker alone. And I
Okay.
spent hours and hours and hours sitting in the hospital with 2 masks on and a shield. And the only things I was able to watch was Finding Dory and the first of the new Star Trek movies. And I watched that movie with him over and over and over again. And I can still watch it, but now seeing it makes me feel the same way Finding Dory does, like a little bit connected to him in that time. Because as hard as it was, I have had a rough relationship with my father.
Mm-hmm.
So during the times when he was with it, they were very special because it was just us. My father was a fan of big budget movies
Mm-hmm.
and movies in general, but he was not a Star Trek fan.
But he would watch 2009 with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he was a fan with me, because I was a fan.
One of the things that came up in our various emails back and forth is you made this assertion, and I didn't respond to it because I thought I'd save it for the show. So I'm going to hit you with this, and you just tell me where you want to go with it, which is you said, quote, Star Trek today is afraid to take chances, close quote. What does that mean?
So I'm really, really enjoying Strange New Worlds now that I'm watching it without my husband, because so I should say this just so that it makes sense. He works during the day and I work at night. So
Okay.
we have less time together than most couples. We would have watched, if we were a normal couple, we probably would have watched it already. And I'm so excited that it looks like a lot of, like, they're like, oh, it's like old Star Trek. It looks like Star Trek. And that's great on some levels. But it's also, there are certain things that look too much like things we've already seen. And I think this whole idea of being so concerned about offending people has made all of the studios afraid to make content that doesn't look like something from the past. I have to watch Discovery again to follow it completely, but Discovery was a completely new concept and a completely new show. And I'd like to see the studios take chances and not worry about people being offended by art, because people are going to be offended by art. Star Trek started as one man's vision, and other people came in and other people created it with him. Other people created it together. And now it is its own thing. And you're bringing in different creators to make it look like it looks. Say, I'm very grateful I got to interview Amanda Rowe, who's one of the directors from Strange New Worlds. Was one of them, very exciting. And her stuff's actually a lot more creative than some of the other things I've seen. But even as a comic, I do this. I'm trying to come away from it. I get on the stage, I look at the audience, and I try to figure out, if I have like 2 hours of material, right? So if I have 20 minutes I'm performing, which jokes do these people want?
Yep.
Right? Aren't we supposed to be creating something and hope they like it, not try to create what they want? Artists aren't McDonald's. Am I making sense?
No, I'm trying to understand your position. And so basically, the term that I often hear, and you'll have to tell me if you feel that it fits or not, is sometimes fans will accuse the show of doing too much fan service, meaning like this is something that you want that we're giving you that, it's not part of our vision, but here's just something, here's a little treat, a little aperitif for you, a little treat for the fans. And it's just not something that we felt like was really artistically important, but we're just throwing you a bone. Is that sort of what you're going for here with this?
Strange New Worlds. I'm watching it right now. Kirk is on the ship, and he and Uhura become friends. And Spock walks by, so they decide to invite him to sit with them, so that the three of them can sit there, so that the fans can be like, "Oh, look at the three of them sitting there."
Well, and that would have been where Kirk and Spock actually met for the first time,
right? I don't know. I think it's lazy. I think what they did in the movies was way better with reinventing. And even I have mixed feelings about them reinventing anybody. Leonard Nimoy is Spock, like that. How do you reinvent something that was perfectly done?
So I often see this similar type of discourse in Star Wars, which I'm not all that close to, so I might be off base here with this. So I apologize to my listeners in advance if I am. But one of the critiques that I've seen is that, especially in the movies, they've taken this idea that Star Wars is like this great big galaxy with all this stuff happening, and it's really just about this one family. And like everything has to tie back to the Skywalkers somehow. And, the idea that there's a lot of stuff going on here, and we could be having stories about other things. And I think they've done some of that with some of these other shows that they've done. They tried to expand out the universe, but in particular for the movies, it's been like all about the Skywalkers, and it sort of brings the lens in really close, and you have this giant canvas, and we're just focusing on this one little corner of it. And that's been to the detriment. This is a critique that I've heard. I'm not terribly invested in the Star Wars fandom, so I don't really have strong opinion one way or the other, but it is something I've heard about it. I don't know if you want to react to that.
I'm going to say something really controversial about Star Wars.
We're going to start now with something controversial. All right, let's do it.
But this is something I feel strongly, but it's hard for me sometimes to talk to. I'm definitely a feminist. I've always been what you would consider a feminist.
Okay.
The fact that Star Wars went back and tried to explain why Princess Leia didn't fight back then as being her choice, I found really offensive. Because at that time, people thought you couldn't show women fighting, and that's why she didn't fight. That's why.
Are you talking about in the original movie, A New Hope? Is that what you're talking about in Episode 4?
I'm not. I watched Star Wars because
the original 1977 film is what is that what you're talking about?
The newer films, like they show that she was powerful, but didn't fight because she was afraid of her own power.
I'm out of the loop on a lot of that, so okay. I would not know. I have not seen a lot of the new stuff, so I wouldn't be able to be a good conversation partner for you on that. I have to profess my ignorance. Like I'm just vaguely aware of some of the discourse I see online. That's about it.
So I happen to develop a slight crush on Kylo Ren, which of course is so embarrassing as a Star Trek fan, but I watched some of it because of that.
You like the bad boy?
Yeah, there's something about. He's passionate, whatever. Anyway, they re-explain why Princess Leia doesn't do any fighting to try to make it. I feel like there's nothing wrong with girls today knowing that their mother's generation were brought up to believe they were weaker than they really were, than to try to use science fiction, which has always been pro-women. But this is more of the same kind of thing. So Star Trek has always tried to make the world look like a better place, or made us want to be better people. And I don't think anybody that has been a character on Star Trek does it to the same degree that Picard does it. So they're not going to outdo themselves. And when they made Picard, it would have been such a beautiful ending of TV shows for a little while, and an opportunity to make some new movies with new stuff and new characters.
So you're more of a fan of like when they're just going to do something entirely new in the Star Trek universe. Like an example would be Discovery, right? Which you said that you loved, right? So and
like I said, I love the Klingons.
Yeah. Oh, and I think they did some fantastic makeup on all of that stuff. I don't know. I'm still kind of on the bubble about that whole new Klingon thing. But hey, that's my struggle. But we're here to talk about you. So, all right, fantastic. I think we should talk about some episodes. Are you game?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about Elementary Dear Data. This is TNG Season 2, Episode 3. Being a TNG Season 2 episode, that also makes it a Pulaski episode. And this, of course, is the one where we're introduced to the whole Moriarty character. So I want to know from you, Sharon, why does this episode matter to you? Why is it on the list? What's special about it?
So it is the first of the 2 episodes with Moriarty, which I think are amazing in exploring the nature of what it means to be alive, what it means to be who we are within ourselves, and the nature of reality between the 2 episodes. Moriarty is written as a villain, but once he becomes sentient, he still acts like a villain, but we see from his perspective, he's acting like a villain because he wants to survive, and he has his right, as we all do, to try to survive, but as a holodeck character shouldn't. And that it's such a simple, and when we're talking about now, everyone's talking about AI and the fears of AI. What goes wrong is a simple statement by somebody who is so in tune with computers and should know better, but doesn't. It also has Pulaski. I happen to love Pulaski. I know, again, very controversial. I think Pulaski.
No, we're big fans of Pulaski here.
Okay, cool. So it also has her, and she's amazing, and she's kidnapped. She's calm. She's
Eating her crumpets.
Like when he's asking her about, oh, ship, what are you talking about? She's so perfect there, and of course the performance is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. And it always blows people's minds. I don't know if you knew this, but Daniel Davis, the actor, is not British. He's from Arkansas.
I did not know that.
It's always a fun little fact to throw on people who are big Moriarty fans if they didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't. He's always, whenever I see him in anything else, he's British.
So let's follow on along with that then and ask you about Ship in a Bottle, which is Season 6, Episode 12. This, of course, is where we have the Countess Bartholomew. And this whole plot about, are they really in the holodeck or are they really on the ship? So this is a second Moriarty episode. And is this part of the same thing for you, or is there a slightly different take that you have on this episode?
I think this episode's better. I think this is actually my favorite episode, but it wouldn't exist without the first one.
Right.
How he manipulates them into trying to find a way by lying about where they are. Meanwhile, he has this holodeck girlfriend who may or may not be sentient herself, who's so in the past. Hilarious conversation with Picard where she's like, I got to wear trousers. And again, throughout it, they are our loved characters are referring to him as a villain, because he is doing something very bad to them. But all he wants is the right to survive after they created him, to not be put in that nothingness, which is, to me, the scariest thing there is, to be put back into that helpless nothingness. He has to brilliantly find a way to make them care. People who we think of as the most caring people in the universe, he has to do this to make them care. And in the end, they find something. They find a way to appease him. They basically put him in a fishbowl. They turn him into a pet.
They put him in the Matrix.
Right. And it has always bothered me that they leave him there. I was so excited that he was going to be in Picard. And the way they put him in Picard was, again, and they had an opportunity to alleviate this in Picard or in Voyager, in Deep Space Nine. Once a mobile emitter was there, they had a way to alleviate this, and they didn't. And these are, again, caring people, but they didn't. Just really, really stays with me. Also, Barclay's in. I love Barclay.
Oh, a lot of people do. A lot of people do. I think one of the challenges with the episode is that we've revisited so many things from the original Trek, and they chose to revisit Moriarty in a way, but it wasn't the real, quote unquote, real Moriarty in Picard. It was just sort of the simulacrum that was created because of the needs of the moment in the show. You know,
Right.
They needed to do something to get Data's memory going, so they had Moriarty there. So if I could be wrong, but he's still in the Matrix as far as we know.
As far as we know, he is still in that box with his girlfriend, if she is or isn't sentient. And if she isn't sentient, he is alone in a box.
And we don't know what's happened.
Yeah, more like Vanilla Sky than the Matrix, because in the Matrix, at least they're interacting with other sentient beings.
It's even worse.
Yeah. If she isn't, which is just sort of a question whether or not she is. It's not. He says she gives her sentient, but she has an awareness. But there's lots of holodeck characters that have a slight awareness, not like he does.
And we don't know if anyone's checking in on him, or at least making sure that his matrix isn't collapsing inside there, or is everything still in order? Or here's another take that I did read in some of my research for this, is that he probably died in the movie where the Enterprise crashes into Viridian 3.
Possibly they had moved him before then. Possibly, just like the little black box on an airplane, it survived and it's floating somewhere.
But we don't know.
We don't know. But if his consciousness is stored in the holodeck, in the computer, there are people who know these things way better than me. I don't know where that stuff gets, if it's only stored on the ship, or, if they have a cloud like we have.
Is Moriarty on a backup tape somewhere in a closet in the 24th century? Then someone's going to restore from backup one day, and they're going to find out that everything's been taken over by this artificial life form.
But it would have been so easy to give him a life at a certain point, and they still didn't.
Yeah, he's still out there. It's a story that's unwritten. They have to give us a final chapter for this guy. I mean, they've gone back and closed out so many other things, but we're still waiting to see what happens to this guy.
We have the Watcher in Picard. I was wow.
So one thing I want to ask you about is why in the world do you like species 8675309? Because that's what I like to call them.
Prior to that, all the aliens really basically looked like people. Even they were humanoid to most of the species. Obviously there were monsters, but there weren't intelligent interactions with things that were so off from us in this. But for this species that is in liquid space, there's this whole idea that there is a bunch of universes on top of each other that scientists think were sort of near each other, and I love that explored that. The way they communicated with Cass, like it was fascinating and unique and new.
I really like the episode with Kate Vernon where she's the imposter trying to understand Chakotay and humans through that whole experience. All right, what was her name? Archer, I think, which has like multiple meanings depending on how you analyze it in the show.
I love that they walk into this world. They haven't been home in so long, and they see their home recreated by their enemies that are trying to figure them out to try to kill them. And that this species was so terrifying to them that they joined with the Borg. And of course, it brought in Seven of Nine, who I love the character. I love everything that they've done with her. It was a wonderful episode, a wonderful moment in Star Trek. But the biggest thing is that idea that, no, they don't breathe air. They don't need the same elements that we need. That if alien life were to be on Jupiter, let's say, there's no reason for us to think that we're smart enough to know what we need for life. We know what we need for humans, but we don't know what life in general needs.
There's been some great sci-fi elsewhere outside of the world of Star Trek, which is, if you actually met an alien life form that was actually alien, would you even be able to talk to it? Would the concept of communication even be something that could be a thing that could be achieved. And it's sort of this sense of human hubris to think that you could, right? Oh, if we could just figure out their language, we could talk to them and invite them over for tea and crumpets, but maybe not. And so there's some really great sci-fi out there that explores some of that. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
There are a lot of species on this planet that we can't communicate with the way we would love to. I don't think, so I'm going to say something again. I don't think people would eat octopus if they understood how intelligent and interesting octopus are, but we can't communicate with them because they're so wildly different than us. Their brains are in their hands. They only live for a couple of years. So that's an alien living here that we can't communicate with.
One of the things you have to do when you look at a show, especially like Star Trek, is surrender a lot of that skeptical sort of sense, because that's not what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Which is also why I've always had this issue with Star Trek canon, that I just don't think it's a thing that makes a lot of sense, because the writers of the show certainly aren't concerned about it all that much. They're really not. But I mean, there are fans out there who are like hell bent on trying to make the stuff make sense. And I think they're just trying to have an experience that wasn't intended. And they're trying to put a lot of stuff into the show that wasn't really there. But that's just my opinion on it.
I mean, I agree with you. As soon as you have the universal translator and you have words coming out of their mouths that you know are not coming out of their mouths, but their mouths are making those words, we're giving suspension of disbelief.
I'll give you a real example that actually relates to this. Several jobs ago, I worked for a company where one of the things that I had to work on was the all-colleague survey. So we had to send this out, and it was an international company, and everything we did was in 3 languages. Mm-hmm. So everything had to be in English, French, and in Spanish. So the issue, though, is that we had a lot of regional variation. The French that is spoken in the Caribbean is not quite the exact same French that's spoken in Canada, which is not quite the exact same French that's spoken in France. And the same thing is true for Spanish. And so there's a lot of variation. And so when you're putting together a survey question that says, my boss cares about me as a person, and then you try to put together a scale, like, I strongly agree, I somewhat agree, I feel nothing about this one way or the other. You can do that in English. But then trying to translate that into Spanish and French, where strongly agree means the same amount of intensity, it's not a simple problem.
Right.
Because what you're going to do at the end of the day is that some boss is going to ask you to average everything together and be like, what was the all-colleague answer to this question? And you're going to say, I averaged all the employees together, and the answer is 4.7 out of 5. And if you're translation is even off by a little bit, when you magnify that to the scale of thousands of employees answering questions, the errors just you almost get a meaningless result. So the whole concept of a universal translator is sort of ridiculous, except for like the most simple communications, like today, there is water coming from the sky in the form of rain, or I am on this side of the room, or some very simple declarative sentences. But when you start to get into anything of substance, the whole idea of it's sort of preposterous. And I think it's just one of the things you can't really interrogate too closely, because Star Trek isn't trying to tell you future history. It's trying to tell these stories that are really human centered in a lot of ways. So if you want to respond to any of that, I'd invite you to.
It makes the Next Generation episode with his eyes open. I don't remember the character's name. Tanar, I think is
Darmok.
Darmok
and Jalad Tanagra. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes that episode really speaks to that. It would look a lot more like that than it does like most of the episodes. Their interactions would look more like that, where you're trying to understand what the person's getting at from what they're saying.
So it sounds like the Moriarty episodes are peak Star Trek for you.
I encourage everybody who's interested in Star Trek to watch those 2 episodes if they don't want to watch anything else, to understand what Star Trek is doing, because I think that those 2 episodes really, really explain that. And I don't think anything I've seen comes close to how amazing that is. And there's no nostalgia in it. It's just brilliant story writing from a really unique perspective. And I have been a little stuck in the past myself. If people ask what my favorite Christmas movie is, actually 12 Monkeys, which was out
oh my goodness.
long ago. so long ago. So I just think that things have, so when Severance came out, and I was like, oh my God, this is new, this is creative, and this is beautifully written. It was the first time I was excited about something new in a really long time. I have a new favorite in the mix, and for me, that's no small feat. So I'm saying that to just say, those are my favorite episodes. There are so many episodes that are second, and I can list off probably 20 pretty easily that are in my second position, but nothing reaches that level for me.
So we'll talk about Severance, I think, in some of the bonus material, but I do notice sort of a alignment between the Moriarty episodes and Severance. It seems to me that both of these shows, the concept in them is really about people living this sort of alternate life in a discrete environment. It seems like there's a similarity there. So that seems like that's something that speaks to you.
It's interesting, and I don't want to go dive too deep into this. We can if you want to, but it's just not this kind of show. I was brought up I had a really hard thing happen to me as a kid. As a little girl, I was forced into a full-on adult-style relationship that I had to be in and could not get out of. And
like an arranged marriage?
I'm trying to do, because I don't want this to become about that. And if I start, like you and I, we can have a conversation about it anytime. I'm open about it. I give talks on it, but I just don't want this to become about that. So
okay, all right. So continue on.
But I want to make it so that I want to give enough information so that it makes sense. So in a sense, as a little girl, I was forced to be something that I didn't want to be. I was forced to be in a full-on adult-style relationship with a boy that was a couple of years older than me. And I couldn't do things that kids need if I didn't comply. Like if I wanted new clothes, if I wanted to have friends, I couldn't. At one point, I even tried to rebel and say, I'll never speak to him again. And then I was basically told that you can never leave the house except to go to school. So I have had that experience of being locked in somewhere at a time where I was completely helpless and couldn't do anything about it. So that idea of how you do that and then how you get out of it seems to be something that really fascinates me. I was able to get out of it. I don't live a life based on that. And there are aspects of my personality that I know have nothing to do with the fact that that happened. But even at the age I am now, which I'm not saying what it is, I still look to myself to say, are you doing this because you want to do this? Or are you doing this because of what happened? I'll give you a really small, silly little example. Mm-hmm. Doc Martens are back in style now, which is because I wear Doc Martens everywhere. I wear Doc Martens everywhere because when I was a little girl, girls my age, little girl and teenager, girls my age were wearing Doc Martens, and I had to wear high heels to school. And I didn't want to. So now as an adult, I can wear Doc Martens, so I do.
I don't think I've ever seen a kid in high school wearing high heels.
I was in grammar school with them.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Makeup, push-up bra, high heels.
It sounds like you certainly found something in Star Trek to really connect you to that experience that you had.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't mean to go too deep. I just we went there, so I wasn't, and I talk about this stuff in my work, so I'm comfortable talking about it, and I'm unsure how much it connects to this, but it's interesting. It seems like it might.
It absolutely is. And this is the kind of stuff that comes up on the show all the time.
Okay.
Sharon,
okay.
It's fine. It's fine. Okay. Like I told you, I mean, like I said, I had full-on cult members on the show, right? I've had people that were in all kinds of experiences talking about how Star Trek helped them. So
when I talk about my history and my childhood, there's a lot of very, very severe trauma that makes me sort of disconnect from my past. So for example, if I'm in a party, this was a big thing when my husband and I were getting to know each other, and he has a lot of friends from high school that he loves very much, and I'd be with them and they'd be like, so tell us about what you were like then. And I don't want to make the party go in that direction. So I'm like, let's just talk about you. Or whatever. Now I realize there are things I can talk about that are really wonderful from my past that are not part of that. And watching Star Trek with my mom was an amazing aspect of that. Regardless of those other things, we had watching Star Trek together. That boy didn't watch Star Trek with us.
Well, Sharon, we've talked about the fact that you've been watching and consuming Star Trek for a very large part of your life. You clearly care a lot about it. Some of the episodes speak to you because of some very personal issues that you've had in your childhood. It's clearly been something that you've kept, even though you were introduced to Star Trek at a pretty rough time in your life. And you decided to take a flyer and talk to some rando off the internet for a couple hours about your Star Trek experience. So it sounds to me like Star Trek is something that really matters to you. My question is why?
One of the reasons is this idea that the people who are our enemies are in their right from their perspective. And Star Trek is the first of that I'm aware of. The Klingons being the easiest example, but also other species as well. When they're first encountered, the reaction is fear. But once we understand that they're fighting for what they believe in, we can find a common ground, is the way I think ideally we all should try to be. That being said, I do believe that it's okay to not forgive. You can not forgive what happened without trying to beat the other person, if that makes sense. It is beautiful. Star Trek's clean. It's so clean. I live in New York City. There's garbage out my window. I put on Star Trek. There's no garbage. It just goes in the incinerator. It's gone. And everybody's smarter than I am on Star Trek, so I can learn from them. I love that. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I want everyone to be smarter than me so that I can learn from them. And there are always these characters that are trying to understand humanity from a more human level than the average person I know who is very human gives a shit about at all. And then there's the amazing, amazing science fiction that asks all these beautiful questions that only science fiction can ask. And they have always done their best to be in line with our knowledge of science at the time when it comes out. They try. They can't because it's science fiction, so it can't. But it tries to explore the nature of what we could possibly do and how we would go about it. The good and also the bad. Like I remember a critique somebody made of Star Trek. Well, if we had a holodeck, it would be porn. Well, so then Deep Space Nine showed, yeah, it would be. It would be both, but it would also be science exploration, and it would be dates for people like Geordi to go on and have fun. And at its core, it is a universe where anything is possible.
Well, Sharon, I've enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
But the M5 is signaling me that it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru lightning round.
Okay.
The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our little program.
I can't just reorganize the panel and eat an apple while you guys do it.
No, that's not how it works. Are you ready, Sharon, to face
Yes, I'm
the
ready.
Kobayashi Maru?
Let me have a sip of water.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record our guest responses.
M5 working. Simulation ready.
Which starship do you wish you had spent some more time on before it was destroyed? The USS Intrepid, the USS Yamato, the USS Saratoga?
The Yamato.
Which beverage should no longer be served at diplomatic functions? Blood wine, Romulan ale, Tranya, or Aldebaran whiskey?
Aldebaran whiskey.
Which non-Federation ship would be the most fun on a road trip? The Fesarius, a Bajoran lightship, or a Borg cube?
Borg cube.
The most iconic Scotty line. And I'm not going to do the Scottish accent. I cannot change the laws of physics. No one has to tell an old Aberdeen pub crawler how to applaud. Laddie, don't you think you should rephrase that? And my bairns, my poor bairns.
Laddie, don't you think you should rephrase that?
Who was offered the best alternative life? Picard in Inner Light, Kirk in Generations, Pike in The Cage, or Sisko in The Emissary?
Kirk.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing simulation results.
Sharon, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has calculated that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank God.
And now the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our little show. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Sharon is awarded the title of headliner at the Giggle Factory on
Yay!
Planet Pho.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Love it. Love it.
So, Sharon, why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you, where they can follow you, see some examples of your work, find tickets to your shows, and all of that?
So I know that you post a lot on Twitter. I don't do a lot on Twitter, so I would recommend going to Instagram. My handle is Simon_says laugh. I love having followers on Instagram, so if you don't mind, I post a lot of shorts on YouTube. Again, Simon Says Laugh. It's at this time I don't give a good example of the level of work I do, so just follow and look along. My website is Simon Says Laugh. I'm Sharon Simon on Facebook. I am going to be recording an album over New Year's, so then I'll have real content that I'll be putting out. But the best way to know what I do is to come see me live. I'm constantly performing. I'm in Manhattan, but I tour regularly. I'm going to be in Savannah in February, as well as in Florida. So I'm not on the West Coast, not lately, but I am all over the East Coast.
Glorious. So we'll have links up to all of that up on the show notes page up at trekprofiles.com so people can find where you are. So, Sharon, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Here ends episode 90 of Trek Profiles. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you, yes you, that you may send us your delightful greetings, your frightfully angry flames, or audio of yourself playing Nightbird on the trombone to feedback at trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky at Trek Profiles. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it might be sent straight to the Barrens to wander adrift for all eternity. This time, I leave you with a quote from Moriarty, who in the episode Elementary, Dear Data, said, quote, "I'm a civilized abductor, Captain Picard. Civilized, but still dangerous." Close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
Okay, this is your host back to remind you that Sharon, my guest, contacted me after the recording to say she wanted to revise her comments about a few things. So we set up this additional recording, and that will immediately follow this intro. And also, it turns out that my guest turned out to be a huge fan of the Severance show on Apple TV. So we had a lengthy discussion that's full of spoilers for season 1 of that show. So if you have not seen Severance, I recommend you listen to Sharon's revised comments, which are only about 10 or 11 minutes long, and then stop. But for those of you who want the Severance bonus material, I hope you enjoy it. All right, back to the show. Okay, Sharon, we're back as we record this now. It's been a few weeks since we last recorded. Now, I'm just going to tell you, I have not gone back and listened to that original recording, but it is my recollection that you had not seen Prodigy, and I'd recommended it to you. And in the interregnum, you'd said, I've watched Prodigy and I got to come on and talk about it. So we are back at your request to talk about Star Trek Prodigy. I'm not sure where this is going to go. So over to you, Sharon. What's up? What's going on?
So first off, you you had given me the designation of being the headliner at the Club Giggles at the Bach Planet. So I rewatched that episode, and so I would like to start by saying I wish to redact my previous statement, many of them, and not because I'm under the influence of the council or worried that Voyager is going to be put in a penal colony or anything like that. I do believe that I said some things out of turn and that I was wrong. And so it started with watching Prodigy, and I was coming down with COVID. I didn't realize I was coming down with COVID, so I was over emotional and exhausted. And the idea of a children's show that sort of teaches the ideals of Star Trek is phenomenal. With everything going on in the world today, right now, not getting political in any aspect other than in the Star Trek way, we could have a generation of people wanting to understand those that are on the other side of them and finding common ground and finding a way to work together to make the world better. I can't imagine a better world. So I don't know how many kids are actually watching Prodigy, but I did feel when I was watching it like it very much is geared toward kids.
Mm-hmm.
With obviously Hologram Janeway as sort of our nanny teaching us, and it's so creative. It contradicts so much of what I said. The characters are unique. They're unique aliens. They're unique creatures. You have one of the most phenomenal things ever done in TV. A very large pink girl who is super, super sensitive.
Rock Talk, awesome character.
Right, and also brilliant, and saves them because she's alone and she's as fearful as she is. She's like, nope, I'm going to do this. Really changed my perspective, and I went back and watched some of Strange New Worlds, and some of it I do feel is placating to the fans and doing the same kind of thing that they've been doing, but some of it isn't at all. Some of it is unpredictable. The episode with Lower Decks I thought was wonderful. And I don't have to like all the characters. I have been stuck in a room by myself. My husband was not sick, and my parrot is away, so I'm just alone in the room watching Star Trek. I rewatched a lot of Voyager. My favorite, interested to see a Voyager episode that's stuck in my head for years and years, was thought of as one of the best episodes. Blink of an Eye is the title.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it just sort of spoke to me, but it seemed to speak to other people. But
it's huge. That's a huge episode. People love it. We've talked about it on the show like at least eight or 10 times.
Episode. That I don't really have a problem with Floating Green Troy, but I really hate Crusher sleeping with the ghost. We all have episodes of our favorite shows that don't actually hit the mark, is my thing.
One of the things I want to say about animated Trek generally nowadays, which is Lower Decks and Prodigy, is that I think it can deliver on lowercase Star Trek, quote unquote, more than live action can in the following way. In that we're often told that the Federation is this world, hundreds of worlds, right? Thousands of worlds, right? Coming together to do all this stuff. And yet in live action Star Trek, for the most part, we only see about 15 races in the Federation, right? And every time they're introducing new characters, like, well, now it's a new Trill. Well, now it's a new Vulcan, now it's a new, same old, right? And it's just sort of more of the same. And what I really loved about Prodigy is that they were doing some wild stuff. And they're like, everybody's going to be something different, which I thought was glorious. Plus, it was nice to see the Tellarites actually do something. One of the 4 founding members, right? We get a primary character who's a Tellarite, which you never got before. And they're actually creating new alien races, which the Vanokat and all that, which I think is glorious. And they're a major part of the show, not just a one-off thing. So I thought that was also wonderful. And, in Lower Decks, we're getting an Orion, which we don't get too much of in live action Star Trek, right? As recurring characters or semi-regulars or anything like that, but actually as a main character in the show. So I really like that. And I want more of that. And they can deliver on that sci-fi premise really of the whole show in a way that live action can't, even with, budgets and effects being what they are today. That's how I feel about it.
So I'm glad you had said something in that I watched it, and I feel it's just to hear myself say something and be so blatantly wrong. I wanted the opportunity to admit that before anyone else hears what I said and says I was wrong. I know it.
So did you go back and listen to your local recording or something?
No, I rarely. The only time I watch myself is when I'm editing.
Oh, okay.
So it's hard for me to listen to myself and watch myself. But I remembered what I said, and I remembered what I was feeling. And about 2 episodes into Prodigy, I was like, I've embarrassed myself. I'm completely wrong. I made a very bold statement, and I was completely uneducated in making it. And then adding on top of that what it felt like to be unwell and be alone in a room and watch Star Trek, of all things. And one of the statements I made, I think, was that after, Picard was unique, and Picard was just so much nostalgia, as it was meant to be. To end it after that, I think if we, with everything going on in the world today, if we infiltrate the airwaves with Star Trek and Star Trek philosophy, the world will definitely be a better place. So there's room for more Star Trek constantly.
Roger that.
Something, yeah.
So
that was the biggest part of what I said that I think was wrong.
Did you complete all of Prodigy season 1?
Yes.
All right. Now you're aware that season 2 is already complete.
Is it available?
Not yet. But
no, because they're holding stuff because of the strike.
No, it's actually far more complicated than that, and it's sort of beyond the scope of the episode here of what I want to get into on Trek Profiles. But there's business reasons and stuff happening with streaming networks, and there's a bunch of business decisions that have been going on that has nothing to do with really Star Trek fandom like stuff. So I'm not going to get into it here, but I will say that it will be available, I believe, in December on Netflix.
Awesome.
So you have to get Netflix to watch it. And the other thing I'll say about Prodigy, because you were saying, well, I don't know how many kids are watching it. I get the feeling a lot of it is like mom and dad fans, or like showing their kids like, this is Star Trek for you. We're going to sit and watch together. So it's sort of the way in. It's sort of the way in.
My husband has always had this thing, like we'll see a kid walking down the street with a Nirvana t-shirt, and he'll be like, there's no way this kid likes Nirvana. Nirvana doesn't have things to them that are appealing to kids. That's parents. They're fans, and they're putting Nirvana shirts on a kid. There's so many. I don't know in Las Vegas what your teams are, but here you see kids wearing Giants and Jets and Yankee stuff everywhere, and it's a little bit, sports are great. There's no real philosophy behind the Giants versus. Well, maybe the Jets are kind of underdogs, the Giants are kind of winners, but it's not at the same level of teaching kids the fundamentals of what it is in Star Trek. The prime directive is to apply that to everyday life, is basically letting everybody be who they are, and just the aspects of working with your enemies to better the world rather than hurt each other is just phenomenal. So if I had kids, they would watch it. Of course, I have a parrot, and she watches PBS Kids because that's what I can get her to watch.
Glorious. All right, well, fantastic. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Anything else you wanted to update us on as far as Star Trek goes?
No, I also watched very short treks. I smoked some weed and I was laughing. I didn't think they were as weird as you thought. I thought a lot of them made sense, that they were so well done, so funny.
Well, that's one point of view. Let's just say that there were many different kinds of reactions to those.
I thought they were hilarious, and being stuck home, rewatching a lot of Voyager has been really wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you for coming back on and updating us on your point of view. And because I always appreciate any guest who has a change of an opinion on something coming back on and updating us on where they're currently at. So I will include this in the original episode whenever it goes out, and I'll be in touch. So more to come.
Thank you. Sounds great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sharon. But hey, it is a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I appreciate your patience so much. I was putting it off and putting it off because of that last thing I wrote. I am a diehard Star Trek fan.
Yes.
I feel like they're overdoing it, and it's an odd thing.
All right, let's save that for the show.
Okay, so I didn't know if you wanted to talk about it because I even am uncomfortable talking about it with some of my Star Trek fans here.
No,
And friends here.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Okay. Pictures of collections or anything like if you collect any Star Trek stuff, you ever done a cosplay, you got a photo of that. We're going to want to get pictures.
I used to have all these action figures, and they used to be all over my bookshelves, but I don't have that. What I do have though, and I don't know, I don't know if you talk about deep stuff like this, but I had a nervous breakdown about a little over 10 years ago, and I was given a denim jacket as a birthday gift, and I have a Starfleet patch on it. I've had that jacket forever, and that's what I'm wearing in my headshot.
Oh, well, then we should definitely talk about that. Now, you're in New York. Where do you identify as from?
I love that you identify as from, because I identify as from New York because I've lived in New York for over 10 years. I'm born in New Jersey. I'm born in the part of New Jersey that's right across the river. So
it's like Hoboken or someplace like that?
Yeah, the place I'm from is right next to Hoboken.
Fort Lee or something?
It's called North Bergen, but then people think I'm from Bergen County, which is a very different place. So this is, being a Hudson County person is identifying as being from New York anyway. And I've lived in Washington Heights for over 10 years.
And I first encountered you on the Severed podcast, which is a podcast about the show Severance, which I hope you're up for discussing a little bit later. Maybe we can put some of that in the bonus content.
Absolutely. I love talking about Severance, and so few people I know, including my Star Trek fan friends, have not seen it.
I know. It's like we're out there proselytizing, right? You got to get up in this show, and people it sounds kind of stupid or weird when you explain it, but it's like the kind of thing, once you get into it, you're like all into it, right?
A lot of my friends, I'm like, I promise you it's good, and John Turturro's in it. And they're like, oh, John Turturro, but they still won't watch it.
And not only that, but it has the fantastic Christopher Walken as well.
For whatever reason, comedians love John Turturro.
Right on. Well, we'll talk about the fact that you're a comedian here in a minute. I think that might play into some things we want to talk about. But
I want to ask you a question. Like just to pause. The very short treks are not the short treks.
Correct.
I have not seen the very short treks. I've seen the short treks.
So these are a thing. They're on YouTube. They're free. Mm-hmm. They were not put out on Star Trek on the streaming service.
Okay.
So you can. They wanted to do some animated Star Trek in the style of the animated series from the early 70s. Mm-hmm. And I want to say there's 5 or 6 of them, and they're maybe each 2 to 3 minutes long. So, I mean, you can literally just eat lunch and just watch them all. I mean,
okay, cool.
But they're weird. I mean,
cool.
They are not normal. I mean, just they're insane. Maybe go get yourself your when you're feeling particularly well, when you're feeling particularly high, go put those on and just sit back and relax and watch those, and you'll either end up spinning yourself into a pretzel or just getting your mind blown. They're nuts.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, awesome's one word. You'll have to experience them yourself. Great job.
Why is that so? Like, some of the, I really didn't, like, I don't, some of the answers,
it doesn't matter. The answers don't matter. Boom diggity, we're done. Was that okay for you?
Yeah, it was great. I appreciate it so much. Star Trek fans in general, the way I've been feeling about there being too much Star Trek, and the fact that I got hooked up with Severance and couldn't stop watching that made me a little bit embarrassed. And I started rewatching Strange New Worlds on my own, and I got the head back. And this didn't come up, but we fall asleep to Star Trek almost every night. We have that channel, and we have the Next Generation on. But when the original series comes on, audibly, it's so different. It will wake you up. So I have to turn it off.
So I'm surprised that Strange New Worlds isn't a hit with your husband. I think that of all the new Trek, for the people that are the traditionalists, it's probably the closest, because it's very episodic. It's much more, it's closer to some of that original Trek than a lot of the other new stuff.
That's the issue. Sometimes it's wonderful, and sometimes 5 minutes into the episode, you can have an idea of everything that's going to happen. That in that way, that's I think what makes it so he just could not watch it.
I don't know. I couldn't tell what was going to happen during that Lower Decks Strange New World crossover. I
love that. I love that.
or that musical episode. It was insane.
Yeah. So, but I gave up on him watching it, so I'm just watching it by myself.
All right. So tell me how you discovered the show Severance.
I don't know what we were doing. We were home for a long weekend. Maybe it was snowing out. Whatever was going on, I wanted to watch something new. So I Googled exciting new science fiction. And the first thing that came up was Undone, I think it's called.
Okay.
And are you familiar with this show?
No, doesn't ring a bell.
I picked it because Bob Odenkirk's in it. So it was an easy choice, but it's like partial animation the way I can remember this movie. Like, it's a movie about death where there's like cartoons, they're people, but then they cartoon over them and the images move around them. And there was like, it's cool, but it started out with two sisters having sister problems, and it went straight into personal conflict.
Okay.
And life is that. I don't need to see, I have a sister. I don't need to see two sisters trying to work things out. I don't care. So I went back on the list and I was like, oh, this is like workplace dystopia. And I love The Office. So I was like, oh, let me give this a shot. And the intro is amazing. So I'm watching the intro and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then my husband's like, maybe he was working. He was in the room, but he couldn't watch TV. And he's like, are you watching Severance? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, please turn it off. We have to watch this. They filmed it at our friend's apartment. And I've been meaning to watch it. We just haven't had time. So I waited for him because so he has a friend who lives in Westchester that rents out his home. It's a house. It's like a townhouse. He rents out his home for filming. So
for those who don't know, I just feel like I should say this, that like all of Severance is filmed in like upstate New York, just north of New York City, like in the Hudson Valley, in that sort of area.
And so one of the main character's house is our friend's townhouse.
Oh my goodness.
I waited for him to watch it. And then he started watching it, and then something came. So I watched that beginning sequence. If you're not going to watch the show, just watch that beginning sequence. It is amazing.
You're talking about where Helly wakes up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I watched it like 3 or 4 times before actually finally watching the show. And then I waited for him, and I did that couple thing where we watch it together, and I watched it once with him, and that was enough for him. Each episode, I'd watch it with him, and then I would watch it by myself after, because I was just like, this is phenomenal. And it just keeps getting better, and it just keeps getting creepier
and weirder.
And weirder. I'm so worried about the second season. It's so perfect,
Yeah. How do they top what they already did? Right.
Right. Right.
So I've had this weird experience, and I want to check in with you as someone who's been a fan of the show. I explained the premise of Severance to people, and so many people in my life have said to me, that sounds great. I want that. Mm-hmm. Like, I want that. Like, why would you not want that? So this show is like about a utopia, right? And I'm like, no.
I think that's part of what's so amazing about it. Before I got to a point where I could live my life full time as a comedian, and I work as a speaker and a wedding officiant. So all my work is speaking and writing and performing. Prior, I could give you a list of the horrible jobs I've had. I've had such bad jobs, and the thought that I could shut my brain off and then come out would be phenomenal. But it's again that thing that we talked about before, that once someone has control over you, they can do things to you and make you do things you don't want to do, and they can even make you believe you want to do them. So it's not good. It feels like it would be good, but it isn't. It's so creepy.
So if people haven't heard of the show and they don't know what it's about, can you just give us a quick idea of the premise?
I'll give you the idea that the premise, as I've attempted to get anybody I'm friends with to watch it. It is a very quiet, small world where people have a device. Some people have a device in their head so that when they're at work, they are a completely different person. They don't remember what happens at work. And when they're at work, they don't remember what happens when they're out of work. And John Turturro's in it.
And so many people just are like, yeah, I would totally get that. You know, I want the chip in my head. And I think, you know, and I was actually thinking about this because I work in a big major corporation. And one of the things I was thinking about is like, okay, like if you were in charge of a severed floor and you have a severed employee who does a really good job, how do you reward them? And it's a sincere question because you give them a pay raise. Well, they don't get to spend the money. If you give them more time off, they're essentially dead when they're not at work. So that's not a reward. So how do you reward a severed employee? And that kind of gives you the sense of kind of what this show is. You know, if you think seriously about that question.
The waffle party.
The waffle party. Oh my God. So we can't talk about the waffle party. We can't talk about the waffle party. That is something that is only experienced through watching the show. Yeah. But I just found it amazing. I mean, but just on every level, the acting is just so incredible. And as someone who's worked in a lot of big companies, I got to say, there's a little bit of Lumen in a lot of places I've worked.
Oh, yeah.
Lumen being the giant corporation, you know, like sort of the sense of reverence around the founders. You know, there's a lot of that in a lot of companies, you know, that I've worked. I've seen a lot of that, and it's just something that is out there. You know, if you work for HP, I mean, there's all this talk about Hewlett and Packard, right? Working in their garage in Northern California, right? Creating the company, and there's a lot of mythos around it. And you know, having the big museum and all that. I mean, I have worked in companies where they actually have stuff like that. It's just wild. It's just wild. So I want to ask you some theories and see where you land on this stuff. So this stuff is heavily spoilered. So maybe I'll put some chapter markers around this. So if people haven't seen the show, they can skip this stuff. Do you think that Audi Gemma lives? Like, does she actually still exist, or is there only any Gemma? Even if she's not physically out. I mean, we know that Gemma doesn't leave.
Right.
But if we were to take Gemma and put her outside the building, would Audi Gemma still exist?
I think she has to. On some level, she has to, because any Gemma doesn't eat. She describes her time. Like, that's in it. She describes, I've been alive for such and such hours, and she doesn't eat. The people have to eat. So at some point, she is either hooked up to something and given intravenous something, or she wakes up in there and eats.
So, well, we know that they do get lunch, because there's even a scene in the episode where they open up the fridge and you can see that there's boxed lunches with their names on it. And they have the snack machines.
Right. They get lunch.
Right. So I'm sure there's food. So I don't know if, I don't know if she actually gets to sit down and eat, but you might be right.
Right. Miss Casey is just in those places. She's only in data refinement during that time. So she doesn't eat then. Yeah.
You know, and other than that, she's in the wellness center. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if she would have no recollection of what it's like to eat food.
Right.
I mean, this is like a particular kind of hell.
Her hell is deep when she says this has been the best time in my life, and you know that they all feel like that's hell. Her whole existence is on doing these weird, creepy exercises with people.
So what is your opinion of the brother-in-law?
The brother, I know him. Like I know as an artist, I know this guy. I've met this guy so many times. Totally full of himself. His friends, they're full of themselves. He's so real. Like you're an artist. You've met this guy, haven't you? You've been to a party where someone can't get over themselves.
Oh no, he's absolutely. Yeah, I have no doubt that there's people like this in the world. But he's so like the dial's on 11 with his narcissism.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, he's not mean about it, but he's, there's mean narcissists, but he's certainly just way over the top cuckoo.
I don't actually find him to be way over the top. I'll share this. I've been thinking about this a lot. Some of the clubs I work in, I get to work with people who have a certain level of fame.
Okay.
And the people who I work with who have a very high level of fame are usually really nice and warm and wonderful to be around. The people who are 2 steps above me, somewhere in between, are like that. A lot of them are like that.
So the problem I have is I can't figure out how him and the sister are actually together. Like, how does that even work? Because she's
the most real person in it. She's
regular,
very likable.
She's regular. She's a regular person in this hellscape. How is she with that guy?
Maybe they'll show that on the second season. That would be interesting.
Because I can't understand that relationship at all. I don't think we get too much of them by themselves. I'm trying to think. Do we get any scenes of just them as husband and wife together?
Mark's there when she's having the baby. Mark's there, but
yeah, like there's always, so I can't imagine what they're like when they're by themselves. Like, does this?
They're in the car by themselves when they give him the book.
Ah, right. Okay, you're right. Yeah, so they are by themselves.
Her, like, she's just like loving toward him, but she's also herself. Like, oh, I'm sorry, you'll see it. I'm sure it doesn't matter. Like when they're trying to figure out where to put the book.
Oh my God. Not just where to put the book, but like, should it be propped up? Should we put it this? Should we put that? Like, dude, nobody cares. Like literally nobody cares about this.
But she's like, it's fine either way. And she appeases him. And I don't know, a lot of couples, maybe they met really young. Sometimes people meet really young and they're similar at that point. And then they get older and they get different. Maybe they were in a writing class together in college and they're just still together and she became this thing.
So what is your theory on what they're actually doing in macro data refinement? What is with the numbers and the 4 boxes and all this stuff?
So I read I can't remember what it's called. I've been on Star Trek, my brain. So I've been offset. I've like put a boundary and I stopped watching Severance for a while. The
Lexington letter?
So I read the Kensington letter and I feel like the Kensington letter says more than maybe I was ready to hear. Have you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're killing people in some way.
They're killing people.
Maybe.
Macro data refinement is?
Yeah. Doesn't the Kensington letter kind of allude to that?
Well, it alludes to the fact that Lumen killed the lady who wrote the letter. For sure. I mean, but I'm not seeing the link between that and what MDR is doing.
The truck blew up. They won an award. They finished their project, and then the truck blew up. I'm not sure if I'm stating it correctly.
Oh, so you think there is a connection there? Okay, wow. I don't know. That's really dark, Sharon.
Yeah, but that's what was in it. I mean, that's what was in the book was that they finished their assignment and then that the truck blew up.
That's one of my favorite little bits of the show is when they're trying to explain to Helly how to do the work. And she's like, you mean I look at the numbers and I find the ones that are scary? Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what is this even about? With the weird computer with the trackball. And it's very weird, That
combination of like old stuff in there too, all the old computers. And it sounds weird. And Mark explained it weird.
It absolutely is very weird. But the thing that I was amazed by, and it wasn't until I started listening to Alan S. on the Severed podcast, which, by the way, if anyone out there is a fan of the show, you should absolutely subscribe to the Severed podcast. I'll put a link up there to that. This guy, he does a deep dive into every episode, like to the level that I am just stunned by, because he's doing like frame by frame analysis of every episode, and like, oh, as you can clearly see, the color in this background, relates to this other thing, and I'm like, really? People try to do that stuff with Star Trek a lot, but the thing is, like, I don't think it's nearly to the level that like these people who made the Severance show did. I mean, these colors in the background all mean different things. And when you see that color again in the background, like that is emblematic of something else, and just the whole level of what's going on.
Star Trek has more happy accidents, I think, than Severance. I think was very plotted out, like every little detail, and that's an easy thing to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's an easier thing to do in 10 episodes than in a whole universe of Star Trek to make
I think
little detail fine like that.
I mean, I think the other thing too is that Severed is really written by one guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the big difference, and I think shows like Star Trek, and this is not a criticism, but it's just that there's this writer's room sort of theory that they have going on how they make the show. And so they come up with these ideas and they're parceled out to different writers. Whereas Severed is like one guy, right, laying out this whole story, and it's really coming from his mind, while other people are helping with certain parts of it. But he's really the creative guy behind the writing. And then these other people that are involved in the show, they're doing the backgrounds and, the clothes and all the other stuff to make all this other stuff happen. And it's just wild. It's just wild. I can't imagine what season 2 is going to be like.
So I'm honestly a little concerned about season 2 because the show is just so perfect and so small. And I know that they intend to make season 2 bigger.
Like, are we going to get outside the town and all this kind of stuff?
I don't know, but I do know that it's bigger. And there's other, if you look on IMDb or search cast, you'll see there's new cast members as well.
Yes, we're going to see more people on the show. And that's the thing, is like, it's kind of this big story, but it's very few characters.
Yeah.
And I don't even know. I mean, if you think about it, almost sort of the indie and the outie characters are sort of different. They're not the same characters. So you have one actor playing really two different roles.
Yeah. Oh yeah. One actor playing an adult and one actor playing a adult child.
All right, I'm going to hit you with some short answer questions, and we'll see how this goes. So, who's your favorite innie?
Irv.
Who's your favorite outie?
Mark's sister. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Mr. Milchick, honest servant or nefarious actor?
Nefarious actor.
Oh, okay. What would you have chosen for the musical dance experience?
Oh my God, I couldn't have picked a better song. And, I'm a big new wave fan, but I don't think Depeche Mode would have been appropriate in that moment.
All right, what's your biggest prediction for season 2?
That Emma and Mark are gonna meet.
Emma
and Mark are gonna meet.
So like the outies.
Yeah, that he is gonna know that's her. That his sister's gonna tell him what he said at the party, and that he's gonna know that it's her. My other prediction is that they're all gonna go back in for longer and be punished and not remember that it happened.
Oh, they're all going to go to the break room and have a different
Not
experience.
only are they going to go to the break room, but their memories of having been woken up out will be washed.
Yes, because we know they can do that. I think we saw that in one of the manuals. There was a procedure for that as they were flipping through the books. Oh, my goodness. I got to say that, the most unsettling moment I think I had watching the whole, because there's a lot of unsettling moments, was when we met it wasn't the waffle party. It wasn't like any of the weirdness to do with that. It was meeting like Helly's dad, that in the bathroom when she's talking to her dad.
He's so good too, because he's so weird.
Creepy. He's so, and if I remember right, that actor is a lot younger than he looks.
Yeah.
I mean, they made him look a lot older and creepier. That guy, I was like, he just skeeved me out completely, and I just wanted him gone. I just could not. So I'm going to make a prediction. He dies in season 2.
That's a really good prediction. Yeah, Helly will be by his side at the revolving.
At the the evolving, the revolving, or whatever. It's just I just can't get my brain wrapped around it. What a weird show. People should watch it. People should check it out.
If I knew we were going to talk about it, I would have watched a little bit before. I've worked hard to like forget about it so that when the strike is over, so they're finally going to release the new episodes. Have been shot. They were just holding them in support.
Oh, okay. I didn't know where they were in production.
I know they're shot because I know they're shot at Mark's house. Everything from there is done. So
is that interior actually at his place, or was it just the exteriors? Or are they doing the inside on a set?
I'm not sure about the interior, but I do know they couldn't be home.
So he actually lives there. It's not just a place he owns.
No, he lives there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they had to go, Apple TV paid for them to go for the whole family to go to a hotel so they could use his house and film it.
Oh my gosh. And the neighbors too, because that's where, what's the outside Cobell? The Audi Cobell. Yeah. But the Patricia Arquette character lives. Mrs. Selvig. Yeah. So Mrs. Selvig lives next door and they have to get her house too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, oh my God, what a weird show. So anyway, I just wanted to
predict that at least one person who we've seen as being someone who's controlling the innies becomes severed and becomes an innie themselves.
What, like Milchick or somebody?
Not Milchick. Maybe Mrs. Cobell.
I mean, but the one thing you can say about the Selvig Cobell character is that she was absolutely a true believer.
Absolutely. She drank the Kool-Aid for sure.
Oh, she's got the shrine in her house. Mm-hmm. She's singing the songs. I mean,
she sings the song to the baby. That's one of the creepiest moments.
Let your fans know that you've been talking about Star Trek.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your patience and for doing this. It was super fun. I wish I had taken the pressure off myself and just been like,
now this is a very.
Just because you think there's too much Star Trek out right now doesn't mean you're not still a true fan.
I do not. That is not what we do here. That is not what we do here, and it's actually disappointing to me that I have invited people on the show who have said I'm not a big enough Star Trek fan or the right kind of Star Trek fan, or I'm not to the level of other Star Trek fans. And I just that's not like, I don't think you know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
This is not what we do on this program. So, all right. Have a great day and send me your stuff and I'll be in touch.
Thank you. I will. So good meeting you.
Bye, Sharon. Take it easy.